All right. So
In that message I was delivering, I was a little uncomfortable sharing that because I had never shared it publicly before, and as amazing as the whole story is, and you'll understand this as soon as I get into the story, but God finally, I kind of kept it to myself for years until he kept verifying. It was like the Lord saying, Carl, you must share this. My people need to know this. I didn't give this to you for you to just sit around and bask in. So here's how it went. I had a dream in the middle of the night. Like the Apostle Paul says, I don't know if I was in the body or out of the body. All I know is I was caught up to paradise. Well, I'm not claiming it was equal to that, but I'm saying it was more than a dream somehow. Because to this day, all these years later, it is so fresh. I can still smell the smells. I can still see the sights. Yes, I could smell smells. It was unbelievable. It was like I physically was somewhere else. But it wasn't an out-of-body experience that I knew I was out of my body. I thought it was a dream until I woke up, and then it was so startlingly real that it took me several years before I shared it with anybody because it kind of freaked me out. Here's what happened. So I go to bed, go to sleep. All right. In my dream/vision, whatever, I could hear the sounds of life. I could hear horns honking, people talking, conversations. I couldn't make out specific words, but like multitudes of people talking, cheering, maybe watching a ball game. Heard babies crying, not in terror or anything, just baby talk and crying and people talking. It was the sounds of life. I never turned around. I don't know if I was prohibited from doing that. I had no inkling to do it. I was looking at the expanse of the sky. Beautiful, beautiful night. Hearing all of the sounds behind me of life, not a care in the world. As I was watching the stars and constellations, and I can remember my dream identifying a couple of the constellations that I know and literally seeing them. And then the next thing I know is that the stars begin to take on colors. And I see these colors in my dream, and I can remember thinking, not only is this beautiful, but this is very unusual. I don't know that I've ever seen this phenomenon before. And then I would see things streaking across the sky, maybe like a comet or something, but it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen with colors involved in it. And then some of the constellations began to kind of almost swirl, not like a fan, but just kind of started moving like that. And then they started shifting positions a little bit. Then I can remember thinking, okay, something supernatural is going on. Now all this is happening in my mind as I'm watching. I'm still hearing the sounds of life. Then I hear the sounds of life behind me getting a little more panicked. It's like they're seeing it too, and they don't know what to make of it. I can remember that I didn't have a feeling of terror. I had a feeling of awe and wonder and thinking something is happening in the heavens. There's a shifting, there's a shattering, there's something is going on, supernatural. And then the stars appeared, literally, to fall from the sky. Not just fall, but to be zooming towards the earth. At the same time that it looked like, well, now I know the scriptures that talk about the heavens being rolled up like a scroll. It looked like almost like a dimensional shift that was taking place. And then the streaking coming down, and then the sounds of life behind me. Holy terror. People were shrieking, screaming. You could hear people, oh my God, and and then sirens were going off and warning sounds, and it was like something cataclysmic was happening. I'm still watching it. It was happening so quickly, and I remember thinking, well, I don't have any fear in me. The next thing I know, there is a presence beside me. I'm not allowed to look, or I didn't look, but I was aware that I was in the midst, the arms of a presence, or in the midst of a presence, a personal presence. The Apostle Paul said that. He said, look, I'm telling you, your mind can't conceive. Your ear has never heard, your eyes have never seen. He's the one that said, I don't know if I was in the body or out of the body, but I went somewhere and I saw things and I heard things that I'm not even permitted to tell at all. So I had something similar to that happen to me. I'm not comparing myself to the Apostle Paul. My experience was not near as complete or as detailed as his or John's or Daniel's, but that happened to me. Now, it was so real and so profound. It was unlike anything. I thought to myself, before I share this with anybody, if I ever do, I'm going to give it some days and some weeks to see if it kind of goes away. You know how you can have a vivid dream and you think, well, I'll never forget that. And then 3 months later, you don't remember anything. It's gone. Okay. So I just thought, let me just see if that happens. Well, the weeks went by and all I could do was think about it. Not all I could do, but often. So here's what I shared with the congregation. Because now your viewers are listening and say, well, that's pretty cool, but you could just have bad pizza that night, or you could be lying. You could be making this up. So I know that. This is why I didn't share it. But here's what happened. Some years later, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years later, my wife and I are very close. We have been since we were married. And we try every afternoon if we're together. I travel a lot. If we're together, just sit down, have a cup of coffee, just talk for an hour, just talk. So we were doing that one day, years after my dream. Several times I started to tell her this dream, but I just hesitated. I just thought, I know my wife would believe me, but it's so amazing. How do you describe that? How do you describe that beyond a dream? How do you say it was a dream, but it wasn't? It was more than that. How do you describe that? I didn't know how to put it in words, so I didn't. Well, anyway, years later, sitting down, having coffee, my wife is there, and I said, I got to tell you something that happened to me. And I said, please don't think I'm crazy. And she kind of laughed. Well, I already think that. We've known each other since we were 10, so I mean, we're great buddies. We're having a good time. And I said, so I told her just what I related to you. She's just spellbound looking at me. She doesn't say a word. And I'm thinking, she thinks I'm nuts. But when I finished, these were her words. She said, you need to ask your grandson your dream. She says, I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? She says, he's coming this afternoon. And he had it years ago when he was just a little boy. Like maybe 3 or 4 years old. And now he's much older. She says, but he's coming this afternoon to the house. She says, I'm not going to say a word to him. And she said, when he walks in the door, sit him down and just say to him, his name's Parker. Parker, tell me about dream. And she said, I want you to just be quiet and listen to him. I said, okay. So he comes. I ask him, come in and ask him. Said, before we go, I think we're going to go play a little golf that day or something. I said, before we go, I said, sit down for a minute, I want to talk to you. And so I asked him, I said, he calls his grandmother Giggy. That's how he was trying to say grandmother when he was 1 year old, I think, and it just stuck. So I said, Giggy said to ask you about dream. Well, he kind of snapped his head around and looked at her like, is it okay if I tell him? And he looked back, he said, sure. And he said, I've never told it to anybody but Giggy. And I said, okay, well, she told you to tell me because I've got something to tell you. And he said, okay. First words out of his mouth. Well, Papa, he said, I was standing in a field and I was looking up into the sky. Basically, he describes everything that happened to me. I mean, seriously, he said, he didn't call it the sounds of life. He said, I heard people behind me. He said, it sounded like a big city, but he said, I didn't turn around. I never saw it. I just heard it. And he said, but I'm looking at the sky. And he said, then the stars started moving. And I thought, how freaky is that? And he said, they started changing colors. And then he just describes the whole thing, except he has more detail. He gets it right up to the point where everything's kind of, the dimensions are shifting. The sky, there's like streaks are coming down, like the stars are falling from the heavens. And he kind of describes it like me. And then he said, and then I woke up. And I said, and then my wife's over there now, she's got tears and she said, I told you. She says, y'all had the very same dream. She said, that's impossible. Okay, so that's cool. Now it's a family thing. And of course, we all believe each other. Now, my grandson, when he was just little, I don't know, 3 or 4, he didn't know anything about chariot. Now that he's older, he's saying that's what happened. He didn't know anything about mine, so how could he have made up the stars and the colors and the people behind them? And, it's exactly the same as mine. And it's just like exploding forward. And people may say, well, maybe people in every generation have had this. Yeah, but not every generation has had a thing called the internet and YouTube and Facebook. And so now it's everywhere. People are talking about it. And through the mouth of a child, see? Psalm says, out of the mouths of babes, I will, give my praise. Then through the mouth of I'm going to call myself an old man, a pastor, preacher, a grandfather. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will dream dreams. Your old men will have visions. Doesn't the Word of God say that? Old Testament and New Testament. So here's this little boy, a child, a son, a grandson, who's prophesying, if you will. Then, about 5 or 6 years later, we're just getting on with life. I'm preaching, I'm doing conferences. My son comes with me, he's a grown man. You've probably seen him or met him. We are at a prophecy conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I had just finished preaching. So as I come out, I go to my table, had written a couple books, and there they are. Boom, they're just piled in. My son's standing over to my left, answering people's questions about the books. So that's going on at the table. Crowd of people. People right in the front are talking to me. Hey, can you sign this? And what's this book about? And so we're having those conversations. And I'm looking over the crowd. I'm tall like you are, not as tall as you are, but I'm tall, and so I can see right over the crowd. And I see when she gets closer, she's crying. Not boo-hooing yet, but just tears, and her eyes are swelled. And I said, oh, bless her heart. She's got some heart issues here. She's wanting to talk to the preacher, Well, she got almost down to the front line. She was standing a couple rows back and looking at me, just kind of looking at me like she wanted to engage me. And then I saw her just kind of get discouraged, and she turned and walked back through. And I'm thinking, oh, gosh, I wanted so bad to say, wait a minute. But I couldn't because I'm signing books and people were talking. But I'm watching all of this. And she goes out. I watch her go out the foyer to the big front doors of the church, and she goes out. And the doors open. I'm seeing people come and go. I see her again. And she comes in. And she starts kind of making her way through the crowd again, but it's much less now, so it's a lot easier. And I'm thinking, all right, now this time I'm going to talk to her, because obviously something's on her mind. And she's, Pastor, can I talk to you? And she's still got swollen eyes and tears. She's wiping tears off her cheek. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, what's your name? She said, my name's Veronica. She says, while you were preaching, God spoke to me. And she says, God, I've never heard the voice of God before. And she says, I didn't hear it in my ears, but I heard it in here. And she said, he told me that I had to talk to you, that you had the answer for me, that you would know the answer to my question. Well, I had no clue where she was going, and so I wanted to be humble about it. I don't know everything, but if God told you, maybe I will know. And she says, it's about a dream I had, and God told me that you could interpret it. Now, remember, this has been years since I had the dream and taught my sons. I'm not even thinking about that. It's been years, 5 or 6, 7 years. And all I'm hearing is, I need you to interpret a dream. Well, I know that that's done, and I know God can give people that gift, and I know it's in the Bible, but I've never advertised or considered myself to be an interpreter of dreams. I don't even know my own dreams, most of the time. Well, she says, I want you to interpret this dream. God told me you can interpret it. And I'm thinking, all right, either she didn't hear from God, or God's getting ready to give me a gift to interpret this girl's dream. So I'm ready. I said, well, just tell me and I'll tell you. I said, now, I'm not going to try to pretend like I know something. If I don't have a clue, I will tell you. And I hope it doesn't hurt your feelings. But I said, I don't jerk people's chains on that. If I don't know what it is, she says, okay. She said, I was standing in a field. When she said those words, I didn't know where she was going to go. But my son grabbed my jacket. He just kind of like, Dad, listen to this now. She says, and I was looking up in the sky, and I was looking at the stars. And when she said that, I'm about to break down. And I'm looking at her, and and then she starts describing the whole scenario. I hear the people behind me. I hear children. She said, I wasn't allowed to look. And she said, then the stars started moving. Now, my son Brandon, who's the father of my grandson, who knows all of that, he just says, he grabs my arm again. He says, oh my gosh, Dad. And Veronica stops and says, do you know what this is about? And Brandon said something like, he's had the same dream. And she goes, what? And I said, yes. Finish what you're saying. And she said, well, I'm almost finished. She says, so the stars come and they fall out of the sky. And then she says, and she says, and I just screamed and I got on the ground and covered my head in the star. And then I woke up. And she says, what was that? She says, it was so real. This happened to me months ago. And she said, I told my husband, and we came to this conference. She said, I would need an answer to this. She said, it was so real, I can't get it out of my mind. And she says, you're telling me you had the same dream? I said, exactly, except my dream went further, and I know what it is. And she goes, oh my gosh, God did speak to me. You know, I said, Veronica, I know what the answer is to this dream. And I said, now this is 1,000 people in Minneapolis. I'm from Florida. And she describes my dream and my grandson's dream. And I saw her come and go, and I asked her, I said, why'd you leave? She said, well, I got scared. And then I couldn't get to you. And my husband and my children, she said, I've got little children, they're out in the car. She said, I went out there and just bawled. And my husband said, you must go back in. You must talk to him.